Hello Pisces, and welcome to your Lunar Cycle insight video for the cycle beginning with the new moon in Libra on the 8th or 9th of October, depending on where you are in the world, and culminating with the new moon in Scorpio on the 7th of November. So we know that this is a profoundly deep, rich, alchemical month of change and growth and soul healing as Venus does her deep dive into the underworld in your fellow water sign, Scorpio. So this is the month that I am calling evolution through relationship, because this is the time that we get to really meet our shadows and our fears through the mirror of the other. And this does not necessarily have to just be romantic partnerships, lovers, husbands and wives. This can also be friends, family, children, co-workers, anyone that we are in relationship and connection with, particularly those connections that are deep, intimate and soul-bearing, are up for investigation this month. So we're going to dive deep into all of that and how that plays out personally through your birth chart. But first, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Chiron, because Chiron, the wounded healer, the cosmic shaman, has just retrograded back into your sign. So Chiron was in Pisces from 2010 up until April this year, when he shifted into Aries. He's just at the time of the Aries full moon at the end of last month moved back into Pisces, where he will remain for a few months until he goes back into Aries again in February 2019. And I just wanted to mention this because it's been coming into my awareness as well as a Pisces riser, coming into my consciousness, that those of us with strong Pisces placements are going back in for another layer of karmic cleansing, another layer of soul healing, of emotional healing, as Chiron comes back into our sign. Another round of learning those Chiron in Pisces lessons around boundaries, self-sacrifice, self-sabotage, martyrdom, addictive behaviours and patterns. This is a point where we can really kind of mop up the loose emotional patterning, you know, really get to the core, really get to the center of old emotional wounds that we have been carrying throughout our lifetime. Chiron won't come back here for another 50 years. So this is a pivotal time of self-healing, of soul reclamation, of soul retrieval in those Piscean shadow areas. So I just wanted to mention that to you all, in case you're feeling this kind of shift in energy. And also just to say that those of you who are familiar with your chart, if you have any placements in the final degrees of Pisces between 30 and 27, you will be receiving another personal conjunction, another personal alignment from Chiron during this period, which can make this feel even more intense for you. So this can be a time really of you clearing up the lessons of the past 12 months in particular, when Chiron was last moving over these degrees, and you know, that was very intense time. He was squaring the galactic center, which he's going to do again in November time this year. And of course at that moment Saturn was also lingering around the galactic center, so it was a huge time of resetting, rewiring and recalibration. But thankfully Saturn has moved on now. He's in Capricorn, where he's not bothering you anymore. And we're just dealing with these emotional issues that Chiron might bring back up to the surface. So Chiron is the key to our own healing. He is the key to our soul. He is the multi-dimensional energy, the rainbow bridge between worlds that can help us clear and heal things through multiple timelines, multiple incarnations. So don't waste this chance to go back into the depths and reclaim those last little bits of soul fragment that you've left behind before he moves into your second house and into Aries for good for the next 7 or 8 years. So anyway, with that in mind, we'll now look at the energies of this lunar cycle, Pisces. So we have this new moon at the beginning of the month in the sign of Libra, which is your 8th house, traditionally the scorpionic place of death and rebirth in the birth chart. And this lunation will be in square to Pluto in your 11th house. So this moon really embodies and amplifies the frequencies that we will be working with the Venus retrograde in Libra and Scorpio over the coming weeks and months. This is a time of looking beyond the surface, you know, taking off those rose-tinted glasses that we often like to wear and looking really at the deep underlying psychological patterns and programs that are playing out through our relationships, through our friendships as well, because we've got the 8th house illuminated there, the house of intimate connection and soul bonding. We've also got the 11th house of friendships, groups and circles as well. So this can be playing out in a multitude of ways throughout all of our relationships, throughout all of our connections, and even in our community. You know, there might be things that are rising up and you think, this is completely out of balance. I am giving way more than I am receiving. Or, you know, this is really uncomfortable for me because I am seeing things that I do not want to see about people that are forcing me to make changes. Or I'm seeing things about myself that I don't want to see that is forcing me to make changes. So this is a lunation that opens the gateway for the deeper work that we will collectively and personally be doing with Venus retrograde. And it can also be very much about us not wanting to look at those ugly parts, not wanting to look at those shadow parts and thinking, oh gosh, you know, that's too much, it's too painful, I'm scared to go there, I don't really want to make these changes. So just be aware of these fears that come up as we head into this deep scorpionic season. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is your fellow water sign, so you are no stranger to emotionality. Pisces, you know, you can harmonize with the Scorpio energies quite well. The only difference is that Pisces is much more geared towards the energies of unconditional love, forgiveness and compassion, whereas Scorpio can be a little bit more mistrustful, a little bit more suspicious, a little bit more comfortable in the shadows. But still, both of you are very deeply connected to the psychic undercurrents, to the deep psychological processes, and to the ebb and flow of emotion. So it's not an uncomfortable or unfamiliar frequency, Pisces, really. So for yourself, Venus is going retrograde in the 9th house of your birth chart, the house of higher learning, of our belief systems, of our spiritual or religious connection. And she is going to be joined there by Mercury the Messenger, by the Sun on the 23rd. Mercury will move in on the 9th, just after the new moon, the Sun on the 23rd of October. And they will join Jupiter there, your ruling planet, your ancient ruling planet, who has been transiting this house of your birth chart since October last year. So we're clearing up cycles within cycles here, as always with astrology. And this gathering of planets and particularly Venus retrograde here, is about purifying your belief systems. It's about purifying your connection to your truth, to your inner wisdom, to your own inner teacher, your own inner guide. It can be really finding what beliefs you have that are no longer serving you and weeding them out, letting them go. All of those beliefs and obligations that keep you away from this authentic connection with your truth, all of the relationships that are blocking this authentic connection with your truth can come up for review. Or we may conversely find that our relationships lead us deeper into the truth about ourselves, deeper into the truth about our own needs, desires, emotions, and personal feelings. And this can be a tricky house to deal with, because although it's not traditionally associated with communication, that's the third house, and Mercury, where the full moon will be, it is the house of ideologies. And with Mercury here in particular, we can be looking at where we are very rooted in our own opinions and judgments. So the shadow side of Sagittarius is this feeling that my truth has to be everybody else's truth. Because it's true for me, it must be true for everybody. This is where we see religious fanaticism. So with Venus, the planet of relationship, retrograding here, really we're looking at being open and flexible to allowing people to have their own truth and allowing yourself to have your own truth. And this can, of course, create conflict and imbalance, particularly around the time of the full moon in Taurus. So this full moon is going to happen just the day after the sun moves into Scorpio on the 24th of October, and it's going to be in conjunction with Uranus, the storm god, who has been in Taurus in your third house, your house of communication, since May time this year. So this really does offer a moment of catharsis, perhaps through the voice, perhaps through vocalizing and speaking your truth, because you are a sign, Pisces, that is often drawn towards chameleon-like behavior, where you might say things or do things to please other people. So this can be a time when we're looking at some of those old behaviors and reprogramming ourselves so we can speak our authentic truth. And it will be, coming up from the depths of what is in our heart as Venus reaches the heart of her retrograde cycle just 2 days afterwards. And this is the moment where Venus meets her shadow self in the underworld. She has taken Inanna's journey. She's moved down through the 7 gateways of the underworld, and she is now face to face with Ereshkigal, her shadow sister. So this is the heart of the retrograde. This is where we really start to think about our shadows and how we can embrace and integrate them. So for yourself, taking place in the 9th house, in square to the north and south nodes of the moon, which are also a potent focal point of the full moon in Taurus too, we can find ourselves collectively and personally coming to a point of crossroads where we have to choose to leave the past behind and move forward. So this can be happening very much on a mental level for you, Pisces, but you won't be immune to the more traditional aspects of Venus retrograde: intimacy, love, and abundance. How can we reprogram our beliefs around these very important cornerstone parts of our lives, you know. Our relationships are one of the key areas of learning as a soul in a human body. So how can we take this wisdom and bring it into our relationships and transform them for the better? Or how can we admit the truth to ourselves and let go of the relationships that no longer work? And this will be particularly connected with the relationships where you are, you know, acting as a rescuer or a savior, because we're looking at these nodes in the 6th and 12th houses of service and self-sacrifice. So we might want to look at how our relationships are impacting our energy levels as well, and our mental, emotional, physical and mental health and well-being. So if we're in partnerships that are, you know, creating detriment to us, then now is the time to admit that to ourselves. And also we can be looking at, you know, our fears around vulnerability, our fears around really having those deep, intimate relationships, because Pisces likes to fantasize about these things, you know. It can go off into a daydream and really, you know, view the world through these fairy tale eyes. But are we willing to really get down and do the dirty work and really expose ourselves by entering these relationships that can bring up our shadows, or working through the shadows that are rising in already formed relationships? So it's a very, very emotional time of release for us all, and particularly for you Pisces, with Chiron back in your sign now. So moving on to the more the happier part of the lunar cycle, we come to the end of October and we come to Samhain, Halloween, the Celtic New Year here in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, this is the time of death, of shedding, of letting go, whilst holding that knowing in our heart that rebirth will come as the wheel turns towards spring. It's that time of knowing there has to be an ending for there to be a beginning, and working with that energy, embracing with that energy of letting go instead of resisting it. And for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, this is the time, the season of Beltane, the season of the blossoming of fertility, of sensuality, of sexuality, of Venus, of Taurus. So whichever part of the world we're in, we're working with these polarities of Scorpio energy, death and sexuality. So it feels very, very appropriate that on this day, Venus moves back into your 8th house, which is very much concerned with Scorpio and those energies. And this is really significant because not only does she change signs, she also makes her helical rise, which is the point of her cycle where she emerges from the underworld and she becomes visible in the heavens again. We can now see her as the morning star rising at dawn just before the sunrise again. And to ancient astrologers and astronomers, this was very important because the sign that Venus began her new cycle in was indicative of the Venus energies, the Venus archetype that we will collectively work through for the next 18 months until she goes retrograde again. And for us personally, you know, the house that she rebirths herself in, it is very significant. So collectively, this is a beautiful thing. We've got the love goddess rebirthing herself in the sign that she rules, the sign of partnership, of balance, of love, of harmony, of equality. And very different from the previous Venus cycle, which began in March 2017, when she rebirthed herself in Aries. Of course, the opposite sign of Venus in Libra, the warrior goddess, the sign of the fierce feminine, the I, the myself, I am. Just as Jupiter was kind of moving in, well, not just as Jupiter was moving into Scorpio, but the same year that Jupiter moved into Scorpio, and we saw all of this Me Too and all of this exposure and all of this anger rising up to be met and released, which has been so healing and so important. And now she begins her cycle in Libra, where we can come together and heal in cooperation, in harmony, in peace. So, as I said, for you guys, for Pisces, this happens in your 8th house. So this is a new beginning in intimacy, a new beginning in relationships, and not just any relationships, but relationships where you can connect with others on a deep soul level, where you can truly be yourself, where you can accept each other in all of your shadows and light, which is, you know, another one of the main teachings of this retrograde. You know, are we going to run away when we see the darker sides of somebody else? Are they going to run away when they see the parts of ourselves that we feel are unlovable and we reject? So it's an interesting new beginning and an exciting new beginning for the next 18 months. These kind of soul connections can start to arise for you. You may also feel shifts in the way that you share your resources. You may also feel an awakening of your psychic gifts and expansion and your connection to higher wisdom as well. So it's a beautiful phase of the cycle. Although Venus won't actually station direct until the 16th of November, she is technically now in her new cycle, which is the paradox of Venus retrograde. But we'll talk more about her stationing next month. So also on the 31st, Mercury moves into Sagittarius, into your 10th house of career and purpose, Pisces. And this is really interesting because Mercury is going to go retrograde here, November, December time. And also Jupiter, your ancient ruler, is going to move into this section of your birth chart next month. So the focus really shifts to work and purpose. And that will happen just 2 days after the Scorpio New Moon on the 7th. So we'll talk about that in the next videos. But for now, I'm going to pull you a card to help guide you through this alchemical lunar cycle. And these are from the Wisdom of Avalon cards by Colette Baron Reid. Really interesting. The card that I pulled for you is restriction. So this immediately makes me think of the 9th house and being limited by your own restrictive self-sabotaging thoughts, being restricted by your own beliefs about what you can achieve, restricted by your own beliefs around relationship and sexuality and abundance, and how you can liberate yourself from these old patterns. And it's a very interesting time for you, Pisces, because you have Saturn and Pluto moving through your 11th house, which is asking you to ground your wisdom, ground your highest visions as well. So this can be that sense of, you know, you kind of wanting to float off like you do, like we do, you know, off into the ethereal realms, visioning and journeying and dreaming. But this card actually says, you know, limit yourself, restrict yourself, discipline yourself so you can use this energy in positive ways to ultimately create more abundance, to build the foundation of your dreams. And when we're dealing with Taurus energy like we are at the full moon, fears around finances can come up as well. So also don't let yourself be restricted by your fears around your physical resources, your tangible resources, because after Venus rebirths herself, new opportunities, new partnerships and co-creative ventures will start to form for you, or the ones that you're already in will start to bear fruit. So just be aware of that and think of all the ways that you hold yourself back, Pisces, all the things that you think about yourself not being worthy enough or not being good enough or not being not knowing enough. That's another thing that we can deal with in the 12th house. We are so hungry for knowledge, for higher wisdom, for truth when we're having a 9th house activation, that we can tie ourselves up in knots thinking, oh, I don't know enough about this, I don't know enough about that. So we effectively freeze ourselves into inaction. So don't go there either this month. If you wish to connect with me further, Pisces, there are some links below to my Facebook pages and groups where I share astrological writings and other offerings. You can also reach me there for readings if you choose to. I am wishing you a beautiful, healing lunar cycle.